Welcome to today's story. Are you ready to be inspired? This is the amazing story of the greatest inspirational leader in history, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is the man who faced huge challenges but never gave up, showing the world that with hard work, determination, and belief in yourself, you can achieve anything. This story will take you through his early years, his struggles, his dreams, and the people who helped him along the way. It's a story about overcoming obstacles and fighting for a better future. As you listen, you'll not only improve your English skills, but also learn some important life lessons. Let's dive in. I want you to take a moment and imagine this. You're locked in a small, cold prison cell. There's a narrow cot, a bucket in the corner, and the only view you have of the outside world is through a tiny barred window. Day after day, year after year, 27 years, you wake up in that cell. Now imagine that when you finally walk out, when the door to your freedom opens, you don't emerge bitter. You don't emerge vengeful. Instead, you emerge full of peace, full of forgiveness, full of love. That man was Nelson Mandela, the father of South Africa's democracy, a global symbol of hope, and a man whose story continues to teach us what it means to rise above pain, to turn struggle into strength, and to transform the world through courage and compassion. Today, I want to take you on a journey, not just through the story of Mandela's life, but through the lessons he left behind. Because Mandela's story isn't just history, it's a mirror that reflects the power we each hold to change our world. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the small village of Mvizo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. He belonged to the Thembu royal family, but his beginnings were humble. His father was a counselor to the local chief, a man of dignity and principle, and his mother instilled in him deep respect for community and tradition. Mandela's given name, Ralilala, means pulling the branch of a tree, or as he used to say with a smile, troublemaker. And in many ways, that name foretold his destiny. Because from a young age, he questioned why his people were treated as inferior in their own land. As a young boy, Mandela listened to elders' stories of African heroes who fought for freedom, warriors who resisted colonial rule. Those stories planted seeds in his heart. They taught him that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stand firm despite it later. Mandela attended Fort Hare University, one of the few higher learning institutions for Black South Africans at the time. There, he studied law, met other bright young leaders, and began to dream of a country where race would no longer define a person's destiny. But when he returned home, apartheid had taken root, a system of legalized racial segregation that sought to strip Black South Africans of their rights, dignity, and humanity. Mandela could have accepted that system. He could have chosen silence. But silence, he believed, was also a form of complicity. In the 1940s, Mandela joined the African National Congress, ANC, a political organization fighting for the rights of Black South Africans. He became a voice for the voiceless, a man who dared to speak truth to power. But that voice came with a price. In 1961, as the government grew more brutal, Mandela co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation, an armed wing of the ANC that sought to sabotage oppressive infrastructure, not to harm people, but to make a statement. We will not be silent while injustice reigns. By 1962, Mandela was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment. The government hoped to silence him forever. But here's the powerful irony. By locking Mandela away, they amplified his voice, that by trying to erase him, they made him immortal. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, 18 of them on Robben Island, a windswept rock surrounded by icy waters. His cell was just 8 feet by 7 feet. He was allowed one visitor every 6 months and one letter every 6 months, letters often so heavily censored that only fragments remained. He transformed his prison cell into a university, teaching younger inmates about law, history, and leadership. When guards called him boy, he would calmly reply, "Call me Mr. Mandela," not out of arrogance, but out of dignity, because he knew, you teach people how to treat you by how you carry yourself. Mandela once said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Even in chains, his spirit remained free. When the apartheid regime finally began to crumble in the late 1980s, the world was watching. People across the globe marched, sang, and demanded, "Free Nelson Mandela." And on February 11th, 1990, the world's most famous prisoner finally walked free. He walked, not as a broken man, but as a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and hope. When Mandela emerged, South Africa was a nation on the edge of civil war. Hatred ran deep. Revenge seemed inevitable. But Mandela chose a different path. He chose reconciliation over revenge, unity over division. He invited his former jailers to his inauguration that he wore the green and gold jersey of the Springboks, the national rugby team once seen as a symbol of white supremacy, to unite the nation behind a shared dream. In 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratically elected president, ending more than 300 years of racial oppression. His election wasn't just political. It was spiritual, a moment when a nation exhaled after centuries of holding its breath. As president, Mandela didn't seek personal glory. He served only one term, focusing on building democracy, truth, and reconciliation. He taught us that leadership isn't about power, it's about service. He reminded us, as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. Mandela retired from politics in 1999, but his influence never retired. He became a global ambassador for peace, education, and human rights. He stood for compassion in a world often divided by hate. He said, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love." That single quote captures Mandela's genius. He believed in the possibility of change, in nations, in people, in ourselves. Mandela passed away on December 5th, 2013, at the age of 95, but his light continues to shine. Not because he was perfect, but because he was profoundly human. He made mistakes. He struggled. He doubted. And yet, he kept walking. He once said, "I'm not a saint, unless you think of saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." That's the essence of greatness. Not perfection, but persistence. Not avoiding failure, but rising every time we fall. So as you leave here today, I ask you to remember one thing. Each of us has a Robben Island, a challenge, a hardship, a moment that tests who we are. But within each of us, there's also a Mandela, the strength to rise, to forgive, to dream, to lead. The world doesn't need another Nelson Mandela. It needs you, the best, bravest, most compassionate version of yourself. Because when we walk our own long walk to freedom together, we honor his legacy, we honor our humanity, and we light the way for generations to come.